Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition, episode 122. I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda Cards. And this week's quote: "When solving problems, dig at the roots instead of just hacking at the leaves." Anthony J. D'Angelo.
I love it.
Yeah.
As someone who's attempted to take a few trees down in my life, I can say that this is an effective strategy.
Yeah, I guess the ones I've done, I haven't dug at the roots, but I feel like the analogies.
You've just cut them down.
Yeah, with the chainsaw. But I think actually you could even go a step further and say, I think a lot of us are stuck sweeping up the leaves. And we don't even see that there's a tree there.
Right. Yeah. Why do these leaves keep ending up on the ground?
Yeah, keep sweeping them up. Definitely, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good concept, and it's sort of like the 5 whys get at that, right?
Yeah.
Figuring out what the root cause is. But I guess also just being aware, like, I don't know, already being aware that solving problems is a worthwhile endeavor, I think is a huge step in the right direction. So anyone who's reading this quote is probably preaching to the choir a little bit.
Right, yeah.
But it's great.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying really here, but what's so key about this is all of us, I think, probably have a tendency to Band-Aid fix problems, and because it is a lot of work and really time consuming to get to the root of things, and often you especially early on are exposing, like, you know, you're not just exposing like a little thing, you're exposing boulders that are a lot to be dealt with to actually like solve the problems. And so there's sort of an early disincentive to learn this kind of behavior, because early on it's just like a minefield. And you're like, go dig in that minefield, have fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like Toyota, there's a story, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but like when they developed cars to sell, they were working on their first vehicle designs for like 3 years or 5 years. I forget. It was a really long time. And investors were kind of like, hey, what about releasing a car, seeing as you're a car company? And they resisted it because they wanted to get to a level of, I don't think perfection is the word here, but
level of refinement. Yeah,
that was good and very solid. And so, I think they were building it on the back of the Loom company.
That sounds right.
But still, that's a big risk. And I think maybe it's not that you should dig at the roots. Maybe it's that you should be aware that that's the end goal, right? Like, I think a lot of what we do, and we talk about it on the podcast, is we keep sweeping up the leaves, and then at some point we're like, hey, we're sweeping up the leaves, so we actually are preemptively trimming the tree. And then a while later, maybe 6 months or a year later, you're kind of like, okay, we've figured out how to like hack its branches off, which is great. But now we're seeing that we need to deal with this tree, and that's going to be a big lift. I guess like for you, I'm thinking like rearranging the shop was kind of that, right? Like that was a big move. Like, I mean, literally a big move.
There's things like that. Yeah. I don't know. I often kind of bump up against these things where I'm like, okay, that's what needs to be done. Okay, that requires like hiring some people. I guess we'll punt that. And maybe that's not the correct approach. Maybe I need to sort of break it down a little bit and try and figure out some things that can be done sooner. There's a middle ground there, I'm sure. But often there's, I think, early stages, oftentimes digging at the roots even a little bit takes you straight to that, like, okay, this isn't a boulder we can uncover right now because we don't have the capacity, skills, financial, whatever, to handle it.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. But it's good to remember.
Yeah. I like it.
My first tattoo.
Yeah.
All right.
Jump into topics here.
Yeah. So one of the big ones I've been thinking about quite a bit lately and sort of experiencing is the difference, not the difference, like the pros and cons of like digital versus physical systems.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the digital side is so much more powerful, sort of theoretically, in terms of like automatic computation and order, like reshuffling can be super efficient and easy.
Auto status updating, things like
Yeah,
that.
all that stuff. Like have a count that knows how many days this Kanban has been in this queue, and if it's been there a certain amount, push it to the front. Or if you know how many total Kanban are in a particular loop and you see that 5 out of 5 are triggered, like let's at least get one of them to the front of the queue.
Yeah.
You can start to build in a lot of those rules, but it feels like it's easy to make that a Band-Aid. And also it's, it makes a lot of the business sort of hidden away in a way that makes it less malleable. And I don't know. There's like, I definitely see pros and cons. The big topic to make this more concrete is SOPs, and specifically, what's it called? Kamishibai boards,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we've talked about this specifically, but Kamishibai boards, the concept is to have the ways I've seen it. They're tasks that are recurring in a business. And so you have like a row for daily tasks, a row for weekly tasks, and maybe monthly and quarterly tasks or something like that. And then at the beginning of each period, so at the beginning of each day, you flip all the daily tasks. So visually you see that they're all red. And then as those daily tasks are completed, they get flipped. So they're green facing the shop. So everyone can kind of see the status, and it helps recurring tasks happen. We can make it digital with Arda. No.
There are many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, with any piece of software, including like Trello.
Sure.
And the cool thing there is suddenly you don't need to be in the shop to do it. You can have a screen in the shop that shows the status. You can have them auto update to flip back to red at the beginning of every day. You can take that update and send a report of which ones were completed and which ones were not.
Yeah.
Like there's a ton of really cool, fun stuff you can do with it. On the flip side, it feels like the digital systems just balloon and get out of hand in this weird way because they can, sort of.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Have you started implementing and kind of like seen where things break down?
So we just built out the SOP tool, and I mean, a Kamishibai board is a set of SOPs with a layer of like visual control on status, I think.
Yeah. I mean, status plus scheduling, basically.
What's the scheduling piece?
It's not just status. It's also giving you a frequency at which to.
Oh, scheduling not like do it at noon, rather do it daily.
Sure. I mean, which is kind of same or
Yep.
6 or 1/2 dozen, like whether it's an hour or a day or a month, it's
totally
still scheduling.
Right. I guess you could have like hourly tasks.
You could, yeah.
That would be weird. So no, the answer is no. We have not, as they say, gone to the Gemba quite yet. We're building the tool. But we just keep having a bit of a circular conversation. And really, it's going to be some level of preference. Like, I could imagine it being really useful with a more distributed team. I don't think one is the correct answer. I think there's pros and cons to each. And it's been interesting to kind of contemplate that, I guess.
I think one thing that I've realized is that physical systems can exist without software.
Yep.
The converse is not really true. Software systems need to have some physical interfaces with us.
Like a keyboard.
At the very least, like a terminal.
Right.
Some often much more than that if you want them to be effective. And so it's sort of like you said at the beginning here, like, where's that divide? It seems to be always a case of figuring out at what point do you need to have interface with the software?
Yeah.
And what functions are taken over by the software and what functions are not. And I think that kind of is an easy guiding principle, is like, where do you need to touch these things? And at each touch point, what are you attempting to find out or change a status or anything like that?
Yeah.
And that can, I think, guide things pretty well. At the very least, you need to have something that a human can, an indicator, whether that be a tag or a screen or a light or something, to alert a human that something needs to be attended to. And whatever that is, it can also convey status or record status. And whether it's feeding back into the software maybe is kind of the key point. And whether that's valuable or not.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to say it's always valuable to feed back into the software, which is maybe what you were saying, is like the knee jerk is to want to feed back as much as possible. But that can balloon into something that's not actually helpful.
I think the feedback is always good. What is not good is creating new tasks. And I think those are often non-differentiated, right? It's like, well, we need to know when it's halfway completed, so we'll just put a slider and then the user can slide it. And the reality is no one's ever going to slide it unless their boss decides that they need,
right. Yeah.
And then it's still totally arbitrary. But I think that's a big failure of a lot of software, is that it's good at creating plans, but it's not good at rectifying how accurately the plan is getting followed.
Yeah.
And then all the updating doesn't really happen in real time. Anyway, I guess we'll see. But I think, like, we're looking at adding a social media person. Side note, if anyone knows a really good social media person in the Seattle area, we'd love to talk.
Yeah.
I could imagine that if that's not a full-time in-person, right? If they're out of the office some of the time, I could imagine that being nice to have a digital Kamishibai board.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy. Okay. I think there's a lot in the lean community that's sort of like, go back to basics, pencil and paper, you can achieve a lot. Don't buy fancy tools.
Yeah.
Data management is, lame.
Just more management.
Just more management. I think it's all true to some extent. I think it's also sort of a backlash to everyone digitizing everything and assuming that's better. But there's huge power in the digital stuff.
Yeah.
Especially as you link them with, like, I don't know. Anyway, so we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we routinely find a lot of value in linking linking a digital repository to a physical tag.
Yeah.
And not trying to do necessarily much more than that, in terms of not trying to manage status or indicate status digitally. There's a few things that are really helpful to manage digitally, like any of the sort of processes that are not obvious from physical state in our shop. Like, so this is not SOPs, but like for a work order, we distinguish whether it's been reviewed, active, or complete in software, right? Because that's not we could do that physically, but there's not a lot of benefit. And they're sort of like things that happen pre and post shop floor work, right? Like review happens before anything's been ordered or it's been released, as it were. And then complete happens after we've shipped the things and invoiced them. It's not like there's no real status indicator anymore in the shop.
Gotcha.
So, I think there's some simple things sometimes where you're like, yeah, it absolutely does not need to be done physically. It's very simple and reliable to do it digitally.
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of those, you will be at the computer to do the work also.
Yeah.
And so you may as well have someone go to that digital repository to start the work, and I don't know. Yeah.
Or like you were talking about a social media person who might not be working on site and their work happens on the computer, right? Like there's not a lot of benefit to having them leave their computer where they're doing their work to go over and like turn a tag upside down. Right?
Yeah.
If like their work is already happening here. So I think that can be another guiding principle, is like make the status easy to interact with at the point of where the work is done.
Yeah, and a piece of like enabling someone to do the work.
Yeah.
They're using it anyway, and that is hopefully a benefit and not just an added sort of compliance step.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
we'll report back as we
We'll hear more about it every week for the next 4 years, I'm pretty sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. On the Kamishibai board topic, so my brother is a teacher. He has summers off.
Okay.
He came and worked with us for the summer, which was fun. It was really fun to have him in the shop. And he doesn't have machine shop experience, but he's just like generally handy and game. And but he just started class again, and managing like classroom chores is apparently an ongoing challenge for all teachers.
No way.
So he put up a Kamishibai board in his class and is going to see how it
That's
works
cool.
out. Yeah,
That's fun.
School hasn't started yet, so
Okay.
I think it's like another week, and we'll have some report.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. He was on the shop text thread, and after his last day, sent us a picture. I was like, heck yeah.
Lean in the classroom.
Yeah, lean everywhere, right?
Lean everywhere. Yeah. We on the topic of SOPs, I was sort of reflecting on, I forget if we've talked about this on the podcast, but basically started Arda 6 months ago or so, and have spent quite a few hours doing that instead of austere, kind of every day.
Yeah.
And I was kind of curious to see what that would do to the business. Interestingly, and it's hard to untangle this from seasonality of that business, but the business has continued to grow, which of course the lean shill in me attributes that to, like, more time going into improvement is good.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has been systemizing austere with Arda and sort of the learnings from that feedback into a developing Arda.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking about, like, okay, a lot of people in like M&A, mergers and acquisitions, sort of talk about, like, if you want to sell a business, everything needs to be systemized, right? They don't want to buy, it's called an acqui-hire, which is a nice term for, like, you have a set of good people that we want on our team, so we'll just buy the business to get those people.
Yeah.
The valuation typically isn't great.
Yeah.
I don't know. You haven't built much beyond a great team, which having a great team is awesome, not to diminish that at all.
Sure.
So I was kind of thinking, like, okay, we've basically systemized our inventory and procurement side, where, like, someone else could run it, right?
Sure.
Probably not 100%, but damn close.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of like, okay, what's the next thing? And the next thing is every single process that turns those goods into the thing we sell.
Oh, your business
is totally undocumented, right? And so we've already cracked the nut. Not that it's a big nut to crack, but, like, we've already built the infrastructure of, like, having a digitally linked database that's your single source of truth with physical tags around the shop, right? Right now we're printing Kanban, but you could also print SOPs.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and so we've started building that out, and then the cool realization, and I'm going to say this, it sounds super obvious, and probably a bunch of other people are just, yeah.
Rolling their eyes.
We knew that. But SOPs theoretically should at least cover, like, if you stack up all your SOPs, they should document your value chain, right? It's like, how do you make value in your business? And the SOP should capture that. And so interestingly, we are now looking at how to, and with good results so far, how to use SOPs to then automatically sort of document your value chain. And we're using AI and LLMs to do it, which is kind of hilarious.
Interesting.
Yeah, they do a very good job. That's sort of
to actually write the SOPs, you mean?
There's that, and they do a good job of that, but also to then look at all the SOPs and say, okay, what's your value chain?
Oh, interesting.
And then once we've documented the value chain, the really cool thing we can do there is now if you want to increase production. So the big downfall of Kanban, Not that there's any problems with Kanban. No, the big downfall of Kanban is operating in a variable market or a growing market.
Sure.
And so like a lot of people move away from Kanban when their growth is, if it's like 30, 40% a year, you're constantly chasing around little pieces of paper to try to update them. So it lacks a level. I mean, that's just what I've heard.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. And then you trigger something and you're like, wow, our minimum was good when we set this up, but we're definitely going to run out.
Yeah.
So it lacks control. So there's this idea of command and control, which is sort of like push, and then there's pull. And so we can take the control element from command and control and actually apply it to pull, I think. Because if you build out that tree, you can start to...
The SOPs tree?
It's not just SOPs, it's SOPs and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's kind of a cool realization that like for selling a business or for running a good business, your value chains should be documented. And that works both ways, because now by documenting little pieces of your value chains in making SOPs, you are now backing into this huge project of documenting your value chains, which I bet most businesses don't have documented. And so I think what Arda did successfully with Kanban is that every 10-minute increment of using the software gives you benefit, right? Like you make a Kanban card and that's useful and it saves you time ongoing. So it's a little win, but overall it builds a much bigger thing. So that's like, so with SOPs, building one SOP is valuable. Yeah. But then there's more value we can deliver sort of on the back end. Anyway, I don't know. That was, so we've been cranking hard on kind of making, like theoretically that sounds cool, but actually landing the plane on that has been quite daunting and difficult. And just, I mean, this is just a fun little note. If you imagine every single product variant in a company, that tree is massive. Yeah. And every single operation that touches every single variation of every single product. So it gets out of hand really fast.
Starts to be a lot of SOPs if you're trying to document it that way, or even just document every little limb or twig on every branch.
Right. I don't think you need to necessarily but like if I make an SOP for sandblasting, then from a system identification perspective, what are all the products that flow through that SOP? And then where do they branch off before or after that step in your whole process? I don't know. Anyway, it's like, tens of thousands of rows for a very small product offering. So
very interesting.
Yep.
I have a little note here. Just, it's been an ongoing thing, but just, it's very easy to get focused on the systems as just systems, and just been having a lot of things kind of loop background, both in my business, other people's business, about how critical people are and how those systems really need to function for people. Like, not just that they need to involve people, but they need to work for the people who are in them in the long term.
Systems for the people, by the people.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And this just keeps getting driven home in things I've been hearing, both near and far, like acquaintances and also just on podcasts and stuff, and in my own business. Just like, it's really easy to get sort of myopically focused on this refinement and forget that, one, that humans don't generally work that way. Like, we're not robots,
right?
Which is easy. That's not a hot take, right? But that secondarily, you also need to create a system in which people not just don't function like robots, but also like get to flourish as people. And that's really complicated, it turns out.
Yeah, it's definitely definitely something that's a little tricky. Years ago when Maggie was doing some stuff in the shop,
Yeah.
before we conclusively decided that working together was not
Not
in
beneficial.
the cards. Yeah. Not really. I mean, we you know. She read a bit about lean from a perspective that I was not definitely reading about.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she found is that, or that she was reading, is that building like single piece flow does not leave a lot of room for your mind to wander.
Yeah.
You know, like years ago, before I knew about the sins of batching, it was fun to like have a task ahead of you, like deburring 500 parts.
Yeah.
Like it's just simple. You find a podcast you like and you just sit there and bang them out, and it feels good.
Pretty lovely.
Pretty mindless. The
Yeah.
whole world falls away.
Yeah.
And then you start learning about single piece flow, and it's like, oh no, I should never be doing that. I should always like load one part in the machine, hit go. Then I walk over here, I deburr the one part. Meanwhile, I move this part over from, wrap it in paper, put it in the box, right? And there's some beauty and excitement in building that system.
Uh-huh.
But I think then the person running that system, it is not exhausting. It's fully engaging, I guess is what I would say.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if that's inherently true. Like, I think you could also say, okay, well, your station probably is not designed to reduce mental load, etc. Anyway, I think to your point, yes, it is very easy to become so absorbed with the theoretical optimum of throughput or of minimizing WIP or any of the other, 250 main pillars of lean.
I think we're at 276 now.
Yeah, forgetting that, like, if the people just up and leave, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah, or if they don't up and leave and they're just not happy.
Yeah,
even.
yeah.
That's almost worse sometimes.
Right. Like I'd rather lose a good employee than keep a bad one.
Yeah.
Not quite, but
I mean, kind of. Yeah. Anyway, it's just been on top of mind recently. How valuable people are, how variable people are too, right? Like that you can't just plug a person. I mean, you can, right? Like these factories do it, but they have crazy turnover and churn.
Right.
If you want someone to be long-term valuable, interested, engaged, and happy in their position, you kind of have to like tune a position to what a person brings and what their needs are. Like what their right, like what their emotional needs are to be satisfied in life, the way they like to be engaged. It's just like, I mean, it's kind of cool on the one hand because I'm like, well, this is never going to get boring.
Right. Totally.
It's like next level sort of unlock for the business, I think, is trying to create that system that can actually work for people in the long term.
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, because the flip side, of course, and I just had this conversation with another person in the manufacturing and podcasting world about someone who sort of refused to follow SOPs because he liked the way he did it.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting one because on one hand, it's kind of like, well, the way you do it, if it's better, you owe it to the business. I mean, not owe it to the business.
Right.
It is your job to update that SOP.
Right.
On the other hand, if it's worse, like, stop doing it that way. It's worse. But then I think there's that third piece, which is like, yeah, what if it is just the way they like to do it, even though it's slightly worse? Where does that fit into lean? Right.
Yeah, and if the overall productivity of the business is still extremely high because they are like an enthusiastic.
Yeah, and right? Just to put some like at Toyota, you can't have, I don't think, creativity in how an engine is mounted.
Sure.
Like there's significant organizational downsides to having any variability in process in any part of it. So like that is true. And maybe that is also true for our businesses where the variability creates, like you said this, I think last episode, which kind of stuck with me. Like you were kind of like, there's never, I forget exactly how you put it, but standardization always has significant upsides that you don't expect. Something like that. Right. So that might be me excusing a behavior that is just that. It's like, no, if everyone did it exactly the same way, there would be benefits. But I think there's also just the reality of like, we're running small businesses that rely on people's, not exactly goodwill, but they are much more successful when people are engaged and excited to come to work.
Yeah. And it's not like a big team, right? If there's like much higher downside risk if you lose somebody.
Yep.
Like if I lose somebody, we just lost a quarter of our workforce.
Right.
Whereas like if Toyota loses somebody, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So there's that just like scale issue.
Yeah.
And then there's also just like the fact that there's much more, I'm guessing, much more interaction in a business of your and my scale between all the people, and having those relationships be like pleasant and functional and collaborative is probably more key to the success of the business than it is in a factory assembly line situation where like, yeah, Joe's always grumpy, but Joe still, mounts his engine the same way every time. So we're just going to let Joe be grumpy. Right. Like that doesn't work in my business where I'm like, yeah, you're going to mount one engine and then you're going to come over here and we're going to work on this thing together for 5 minutes. And then could you jump in the car and go get those screws from the hardware store that we need for this thing? Like that level of like switching on the fly and collaboratively figuring stuff out requires just a different level of like, I think, happiness and engagement in your job.
Here's another question for you. It seems, and maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, but in hearing you say that, it seems like the excitement and engagement of developing new systems and empowering people to change those systems, I think it can sort of feel at odds with having someone who will be excited to then just crank the handle for the remaining 7 hours.
Sorry, say that again. What's at odds? Like, are you saying that there's people who like that and there's people who don't?
I suspect to some degree there's people who like just cranking the handle and then asking them to also make improvements. Maybe they just make different improvements.
No, I can tell you that the first is true. There are some people who love to be engaged in the daily activities, do not want to think about changing things. And there are other people who are definitely the reverse. And then there's probably a lot of people who fall somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And
so
like that's part of this whole thing too. Is like sort of, if like there's the like everybody does an hour a day thing, right? Which is cool, but also you're still trying to plug a bunch of different people into one mold. Yeah. Which doesn't always work.
Because like for me, I'd love for that to be 8 hours a day. And in fact, I'd love for it to be 16 hours a day, right? Of just like solving tricky problems. But then cranking the handle to me is like.
Yeah. And I'm someone who's in the middle.
Yeah.
I need some of both.
Yeah.
But in my shop, there are people at both ends of that spectrum.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note, we should probably wrap things up.
Yep.
Thanks all for listening. We love the feedback and emails we get from it. You'll be at IMTS, is that right?
I will. Yes.
Yeah. So I may be, but people should, swing by, say hi.
You may be.
You can find me.
Wait,
what's that?
You may be. That's nice.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like it would be good. I'm just having trouble fitting it in.
You should tell me shortly.
Oh, yeah.
We can collaborate on flights and lodging, etc.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Perfect.
Anyway, I will be there. Definitely plan to be at the Insta Machinists meetup.
That's on Wednesday?
That's on Wednesday. There's been rumors of some podcasting happening midstream.
Oh.
I don't know. Anyway, we're frantically trying to get some shirts made, so we'll try and have something that you can tell it's us. Mm-hmm. At the very least, we'll have our business apparel.
Right.
I think. So if you know what our businesses are called, which you probably do at this point.
Yeah, stop and say hi. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
You can find me on the internet at austeremanufacturing.com. You can find me on Instagram at austere_manufacturing and arda.cards on the internet and on Instagram.
You can find me at likenprecision.com, on the internet, lichen_MFG on Instagram. We've got a Patreon, and the pod as at incremental CI on Instagram. And we'll talk to you soon.